Welcome to Everything in its Place. So in this video we will be noticing that Blueprint has superseded some of our code. We previously exposed things like open door in the details tab. Now we want to get rid of that and only set it in the curve. Because it's important, there's only one place per parameter. Then we'll be creating a second event called onClose and use it to close the door. By the time we've finished, we will have a situation where a couple of things are different. Firstly, if we look at a door and we inspect it and we look at the onDoor component, we will have not amounts of open distance or time delays, just a trigger mass that we'll be able to set here rather than it being hard-coded. And when we play the game, what's going to happen is the door's going to not only open smoothly, but when we come off the pressure pad, it's going to close smoothly. So with this blueprint, we've got our door opening. The question is, how do we get it closing? What we need is a close or on-close event coming into the reverse pin, which will just run the animation backwards. So we want to be continuously either firing on open request or on close request. We'll make a slight naming change as well. So let's go over to the code and start preparing things. Okay, most of what we're going to do over in the code you can do, and you'll do it in a challenge in just a moment. I just want to show you that the whole spirit of this video is everything in its place. You'll remember in the previous section there was a video called A Place for Everything. Well, I have a lovely saying which is a place for everything and everything in its place. And I just wanted to jimmy that into the course somewhere. So this open angle is now defined inside the blueprint, right? So let's delete it from the openDoor.h. We don't need an open angle property. We shouldn't have an open angle property. It's confusing to have it in two places. We still need the pressure plate. We don't need a door close delay anymore. You could orchestrate that inside the code, inside the blueprint rather. If you did want a close delay, then you need to think carefully about how and where you put it in, because it's very confusing to have the animation, the curves determining one thing and then close delay in here. So I'm going to get rid of close delay. I'm also going to get rid of last door open time. The door can immediately start closing the moment you step off the plate, now that it has a nice smooth message. So, nice smooth movement. So we can get rid of all of those things, which is pretty cool. Now this reminds me, by the way, that getting the total mass in kilos, do you remember that we had a task we'd left ourselves, which was to make something into a parameter? It was the mass. It's here. To do, make into a parameter. Let's just do that while we're here. Total mass of actors on plate, rather than being 30, it should be something like trigger mass. Okay? So I'm going to make a new edit anywhere property here called trigger mass. Float trigger mass equals, and I'll give it a default value of not my previous lecture name, but 30 kilos. Okay, and then let's make it an edit anywhere u property while we're messing around with the interface here. All right, that's cool. Now in our code, we are going to need to do a couple of things. We no longer have last door open time, so let's get rid of that. We no longer, well, we're calling closed door, but actually look, if we look at this, what's the point of the whole open door method? There's no point, is it? It just calls open request.broadcast. So move open request.broadcast down inside the tick component inside here and just ditch the whole open door method. We're just having a massive simplification now. So I'm also going to go over here and get rid of the declaration of open door. We don't need that. We're also, of course, not going to need closed door, because what we're going to do in a moment, or you're going to do, is you're going to create a close request or on close event, and we're going to call it from here. So we won't need a closed door method either. All right, so I've made a bunch of changes to the code there whilst talking you through. They're pretty self-explanatory. Let me just compile to make sure I'm leaving you before your challenge with workable code. There's a good chance in trying to do that and talk you through it that I've made a mistake. So I'm going to compile over here and let the Unreal Editor tell me, yep, so I've made a mistake there. On line 48, last door open time is undeclared. So I just need to be removing that. And the point is that we don't need to wait for a delay. What we're going to do now is we're going to say, if the total mass of the actors on the plate is greater than the trigger mass, open the door, else close the door. And of course, there is a to-do, which is we're going to get rid of this method, but you're going to do that in a minute. Let's make sure that we now can compile. Second compilation should be a bit quicker if it's just done one. There you go. I'm just going to play make sure that the door opens. So it's all working. We've just had a refactor. Remember the red-green refactor? Things were working. They were green. We've refactored. They're still working. That's good. Now, over to you. I want you to do the following challenge. Create and connect on close. I want you to finish this off. So I suggest you rename the event class to FDoor event. It no longer makes sense for it to be talking about open door when the event is both going to be responsible for, or the class is going to be responsible for open and close events. So don't be afraid to do a rename. Rename the onOpen request to simply onOpen. You don't have to, but it's just easier to read. Create a new Blueprint assignable event exactly like onOpen, but call it onClose. Wire onClose over in the Blueprint to the reverse pin, and then test that the door now opens when you stand on the plate, and the moment you step off, it starts to close. So go ahead, pause the video, and see if you can get this finished off yourself. By doing this, you'll really understand everything we've just done a lot better than just listening to me rattle on and trying to keep up with me. Okay, it's all about you doing stuff. So pause the video, spend your time on it, and come back when it's either done or you've died trying. Wicked, welcome back. So let's do this thing. Over in the header file then, fonOpen request. Well, that no longer makes any sense. It's going to be FDoor event. That is what I said, isn't it? Yeah, FDoor event. Cool, so that rename there should have done that. Now let's go down to where we define it. FDoor event onOpen request. Well, I said we want to rename that. It was just going to be onOpen. I have to check my own instructions. I hate failing my own challenges. Bear with me a second. Yep, onOpen. So we now want to copy that code and make a onClose. And yes, by the way, we're still polling this pressure plate every frame over in our tick, and that's not ideal, but it's fine for this section. I'm not even going to change it in this section because there's enough going on here with events, different types of Blueprint events, etc. So let's not confuse things. But sure, you could do the whole thing event-driven, but we'll deal with that in a future section. I'm going to get rid of this to-do. Going to change onOpen request. Now really I should have done a refactor on there. You see how I didn't refactor onOpen request, I just changed its name. That's the problem with that, of course, is it doesn't change in all places. But there's only one here. I'm looking at the red in the margin. That's gone. Now we don't need to call closed door anymore, do we? We don't need to set this actor rotation, so you can delete the method altogether. Of course you need to delete the declaration, otherwise we'll get an error. We can then do a onClose.broadcast. Now, I hope you remembered that bit. That's a bit I didn't explicitly tell you in the challenge, but of course you need to broadcast the event. Hopefully you found that by pattern matching against what we did before, which is a perfectly valid way of doing things. Okay, so the next stage is I think that I finished doing my code. I want to compile the code, make sure that works. You need to compile the code for the new event to even be visible inside Blueprint. Unless you've compiled, it's not even going to be there. So the compile's worked. Now let's go into Blueprint. Now, do you remember how you get hold of, why can't I find onClose request or onClose or whatever? And also, what's going to happen to the fact that this has been renamed? Well, let's try compile, see if the rename comes through. It hasn't come through, interestingly. Let's check our code onOpen. So, firstly, we're going to fix both of these things together. I want to make sure that the thing with the new name is in here, even if this works. I don't want it working by happenstance. So, I'm going to go to Window again, Components, which will bring up this menu. Remember that once you're clicked on Open Door, you can now find your events. Event dispatchers, you see onClose, open, same again, right, click on the open door in the components, add event, event dispatchers, onClose. Okay, so we've got the onClose. Oh, I did onClose twice, didn't I? Let's get rid of this onOpen request. This onOpen request, it's just not updated the name, so I want to delete it and make sure that we do actually update the name. And you see another way to get to it, by the way, is just to right-click on Open and say Add Event on Open. So there's another option. That was over there in the Components menu, right there. Pretty cool, hey? So look, we're nearly there. We just need to get to where you can see what I'm doing. We need to say that on Open, we're going to play, and on Close, we're going to reverse. Now, let's watch this in action. Drag it to the right. You don't, as I say, have to compile your blueprint. It's not necessary to do it every time, because when we go over to the game and play, look what happens. I go on, the doors, you see the doors opening, because the on-open event's firing, but when I come off the pressure plate, the on-close event fire, and the whole thing reverses. Pretty cool, hey? Pretty cool. Apart from the fact I can now probably get out of this room if I really run for the door, but we won't worry about that right now. That's just play tuning. that has achieved the goal of teaching you how to finish off this type of blueprint. And you can see that you can do blueprint right next to your code. We're doing as little as possible really in the blueprint. There is a track, a timeline track called a vector track, but we don't need, a vector won't work for a rotator. So you have to convert from vector to rotator anyway. So I used a float track just because I'm trying to say I only really want to be changing one axis of a door, right? But if this was something else and we were changing its position, we may want to make it a vector track and then put it straight into set actor position or something. But the reason I've used a float here is, as I say, for simplicity. But it's pretty simple, isn't it? Pretty simple and clean. Okay, the whole project is looking pretty good now. The only remaining thing that's a bit minging, as I would say, is that that we are polling the trigger volume every frame rather than responding to events. But I'm going to live with that for now because it's not causing us a performance issue. So we're pretty much done with this section. Of course, my room's very rudimentary. What I really want you guys to do is go and do a lot more exciting things, multiple rooms, use these mechanics in lots of different ways, and maybe even create your own new mechanic. But for now, we are doing really nicely. I'm just going to look at it in full screen because occasionally it's nice to see your thing in all its glory, and over there, and then go watch it close. And remember, you can control the speed, you can control the curve, and much more like it. So, see you soon.